The train rolled steadily through the heart of America at 40 miles an hour, its steel wheels hammering a rhythm that echoed through the cramped passenger cars. Inside, a young German prisoner pressed his face against the barred window, barely blinking, afraid that if he did, the vision outside might vanish. His name was Vera Coleman, a 23-year-old corporal from the outskirts of Hamburg, and in that moment, his entire understanding of the world was quietly collapsing. Beyond the glass, Kansas farmland stretched toward horizons that seemed impossibly distant. Endless waves of green and golden wheat shimmered beneath the afternoon sun, rolling gently like an ocean frozen in motion. But it wasn't the land that stunned him. It was what stood beside it. Farmhouses dotted the plains, modest and practical, surrounded by barns, silos, and fences. And beside nearly every one of them sat automobiles. Black sedans. Green trucks. A bright red coupe that gleamed like polished fire. Dozens of cars scattered across the countryside like toys left behind by careless giants. Vera turned sharply to the man seated beside him, an older sergeant named Heinrich Mao, and spoke rapidly in German. "That is the third farm in 10 minutes. The third with its own automobile." Mao stared silently through the window, his brow furrowed. "There must be some mistake," he muttered. "Perhaps they are government vehicles. Fleet cars for officials." But even as he spoke, he knew it was unlikely. These cars bore no official markings. Some had baskets and suitcases visible inside. Others carried the casual dust and mud of daily use. These were not state vehicles. These were personal cars, owned by farmers. The train carried 287 German prisoners of war, fresh from the deserts of Tunisia, processed through Camp Shanks in New York, and now bound for Camp Concordia, Kansas. They had crossed an ocean that their commanders claimed German submarines controlled. They had surrendered in defeat, endured weeks of transport, and now, through barred windows, they were witnessing something that shattered every story they had been told about their enemy. Electric lines marched across the fields in long, unwavering rows. Poles stretched into the distance, carrying power into places that by German standards should have lived in darkness. In rural Germany, electricity remained incomplete even in 1943. Entire villages still relied on oil lamps and candles. Yet here, in the farmlands of Kansas, every farmhouse glowed with the promise of modern life. Refrigeration, radios, lighting, comfort. As the train thundered onward, small towns drifted into view. Water towers rose like sentinels, painted with bold town names. White church steeples pierced the sky. Main streets lined with storefronts displayed goods behind wide glass windows. At one crossing, a line of cars waited patiently for the train to pass. Children waved from back seats. A baker's truck idled beside a farmer's pickup. The children waved directly at the prisoners. At German soldiers. At the enemy. Mao swallowed hard. "We were told these people were starving," he whispered. "That their economy collapsed. That their society was broken. Look at them. They live better than our officers' families in Munich ever did." No one answered. The evidence outside the window spoke louder than words. The Kansas sun dipped lower, washing the fields in gold and amber. Shadows stretched across the plains. And inside the train, something fragile but powerful was happening. The walls of belief built by years of relentless propaganda were beginning to crack. In Germany, these men had been taught a carefully crafted story. America was decadent. Americans were enslaved by greedy capitalists and Jewish financiers. The Great Depression was proof of capitalism's inevitable failure. Breadlines and poverty defined American life. Their factories, Germans were told, produced only desperation. The war effort was unsustainable. their economy hollow. Yet what they now saw contradicted every sentence. Germany in the early 1940s was a nation under strain. Rationing governed daily life. Coffee, butter, sugar, meat, and gasoline became rare luxuries. Automobiles, once uncommon even in peacetime, became almost non-existent. Gasoline was reserved strictly for military use. Private vehicles sat unused, slowly rusting in garages. Cities endured bombing. Villages endured hunger. Even loyal citizens felt deprivation. And now here they were, passing farms where ordinary families owned not one vehicle, but sometimes two. Where electricity lit every room. Where radios filled kitchens with music and news. Where prosperity was so widespread it appeared invisible to those who possessed it. When the prisoners arrived at Camp Concordia, their astonishment only deepened. The wooden barracks stood behind chain-link fencing on wide Kansas prairie. Guards enforced discipline, but treatment followed the Geneva Convention. Meals were plentiful. Breakfast included eggs, oatmeal, bread, butter, and real coffee. Lunch brought meat, vegetables, fruit. Dinner came with soup, potatoes, dessert, and more coffee. Many prisoners wept quietly during those first meals. They had not eaten so well in years. Letters home filtered through American censors. The prisoners wrote cautiously, yet honestly. One letter read, "Dear Mother, we are being treated well. The food is more than sufficient. Meat every day. Real coffee, butter, eggs. I know this is difficult to believe, but it is true. Please tell the neighbors so they will not worry." But the camps were only part of the story. The true education came from farm labor. American farms desperately needed workers. With millions of men overseas, labor shortages threatened harvests. The Geneva Convention allowed prisoner labor under humane conditions, and so work crews were sent across Kansas to assist farmers. For many prisoners, this was their first real contact with American civilians. Friedrich Bergmann, a Bavarian farm boy turned Wehrmacht soldier, later recalled stepping onto a Kansas farm and feeling his breath leave him. The farmer drove them in his own truck. On a modest 100-acre farm, Friedrich counted 2 tractors, a family car, a work truck, and machines he did not even recognize. On his father's farm back home, they had owned a single horse. Every kitchen had a radio. Music floated through open windows. News crackled across fields. Women prepared lunches and served lemonade on shaded porches. They showed no fear, no hatred, no bitterness. Vera Coleman worked on a farm near Clyde, Kansas. In a letter to his sister, he wrote that the farmer's wife brought them homemade food every midday. There was always more than they could eat. She spoke to them as though they were ordinary workers, not prisoners. One afternoon, she showed him a photograph of her son serving in the Pacific. She knew the Germans were her enemy. Yet she fed them anyway. This kindness unsettled them more than cruelty ever could. As months passed, the prisoners traveled through towns on work details. They counted cars. They studied store windows. They saw schools, cinemas, soda fountains, and stocked shelves. One prisoner recorded counting 47 automobiles on a single main street. In Germany, such a number would belong to an entire region. Slowly, the reality settled in. America was not weak. It was powerful beyond anything they had imagined. By late 1943, political discussions inside the camps shifted. Older soldiers like Heinrich Mao stopped defending Nazi claims. He would simply say, "I have seen their farms. I have eaten their food. I have watched them drive freely. Whatever we were told was not the truth." Such statements were dangerous. Hardline Nazis within the camps monitored dissent. But truth, once seen, could not be unseen. Then came spring of 1945. Kansas bloomed. Wildflowers emerged. Meadowlarks returned. Fields awakened. The prisoners worked among these signs of renewal while news spread through whispered rumors. On May 8th, guards announced it officially. Germany had surrendered. The war in Europe was over. For Vera Coleman, now 25, the news arrived with mixed emotion. Relief that the killing had stopped. Grief for a ruined homeland. Shame for the horrors now coming to light. And beneath it all, gratitude. The Kansas farms had prepared him for this moment. He understood now why Germany could never have one. A nation that could clothe, feed, and empower its civilians so thoroughly could not be defeated by ideology alone. Repatriation took months, then years. Some prisoners volunteered to stay longer, preferring Kansas fields to the ruins awaiting them at home. Heinrich Mau returned to Munich in March 1946 and barely recognized it. Rubble choked the streets. Hunger dominated daily life. In letters to Kansas farmers, he wrote that no one believed his stories. They thought he exaggerated. But he knew the truth. Sometimes, he wrote, the most important moment of the war was looking out that train window. Vera Coleman remained in America until late 1946, working on farms, learning agricultural techniques, and absorbing a worldview far different from the one he had grown up with. When he returned to Germany, he built a career in shipping and logistics. He visited Kansas 3 times later in life, always returning to the same fields that had changed his understanding of humanity. Camp Concordia closed in 1945. Its buildings vanished. But memory remained. A small museum now preserves the story of prisoners who arrived as enemies and left as witnesses. The wheat still ripples across Kansas. The fences still sing in the wind. The trains still cross those endless plains. And the lesson endures. Propaganda can shape belief. It can mold fear. It can manufacture enemies. But it cannot erase what the human eye sees. Once truth enters the mind, lies lose their grip. Through barred windows in 1943, young German soldiers glimpsed a world they were never meant to know. That glimpse reshaped their futures, altered their loyalties, and quietly planted seeds that would help rebuild a shattered nation. The trains moved on. The prisoners returned home. The farms changed hands. But the truth that passed through those windows remains, whispering across the wheat fields, reminding us that reality, once seen, is impossible to unsee.